In today's video, I'm going to talk about the ABCs of powerful professional development for school administrators. And this is exciting for me because it's the first time ever that I've revealed the formula that we build the Better Leaders, Better Schools Mastermind on top of. This is the foundation that provides a world-class weekly professional development experience for our members. Now, before I share that formula, I want to give you just some insight into some troubling statistics that NAESP found in a 2020 study of 407 principals. Now, NAESP did this study in 2020. They surveyed 407 principals. Secondary people, before you get a little too crazy with this, 407 is enough of a sample size to generalize to your context. So yes, what I'm about to share applies to you as well. And here's what NAESP found. 32% of those principals surveyed shared leadership practices with their peers 3 or more times in the last 2 years. Only 23% of those principals had access to a mentor or a coach. And if that principal was leading within a community that was urban and lower socioeconomic status, only 10% of principals leading in that context had access to a mentor or coach. Finally, just over half, 56% of those principals surveyed connected with professional learning communities 3 or more times in the last 2 years. That's a problem. And here's why. Think about it this way. If you had a medical procedure coming up, maybe it was a minor, major surgery, maybe it was something with your teeth, if a doctor or a dentist was only connecting with his or her peers infrequently over the last 2 years, or lacked access to a mentor or coach, would you trust this medical professional with your life, right? The answer is clear. This is a rhetorical question, but the NAESP study in 2020 found those alarming results when it comes to education. So why should families trust us with their most important resource, their children, if of those 407 principals, not even half are connecting regularly to talk about leadership practices 3 or more times in 2 freaking years? Or the fact that 23% have access to a mentor or coach, and in urban settings and lower socioeconomic settings, that number drops down to an abysmal 10%. So if the biggest problem facing school leadership today is that we are not engaging in a regular fashion with world-class professional development, why should people entrust us with their most important resource, their students? So in my view, the biggest challenge facing school leadership today is a lack of access to mentor and coaches, and leaders engaging on a consistent basis to world-class discussions around leadership activities, practices, protocols, resources that are going to make them a stronger leader. And if they're not engaging on a consistent basis, that leads to falling back on what we know. And Einstein said it best: insanity is doing the same thing over and over, yet expecting different results. Now, if we're only doing the same things that we know, we're not growing. And if we're not growing, personally, yes, we're stagnating. But even worse, our communities are suffering because we're making a promise as a school leader, as an educational institution, that we're going to grow and develop their babies, right? And help build the future of the world through educating our youth. And if our communities are being let down, the worst part is that the students suffer the most. They're not getting the education experience that they deserve. It's as simple as that. Now, there's good news though, and the good news is that you have a choice. It's clear. You have a choice. You can engage on a regular, consistent basis in world-class professional development, talking about leadership practices, sharing resources, etc. And if you choose to go down that path, if you choose a different way, you're going to grow. You live out the motto of Better Leaders, Better Schools, which is everybody wins when the leader gets better, Everybody wins when you get better. And if you're getting better, guess what happens next? You're willing to take risks. And if you are willing to risk, if you're willing to leap and stretch, if you're willing to learn from your failures, then you're going to grow and you're able then to build the school of your dreams. That's the last question that I ask on every podcast I host. How would you build your dream school? We all have a dream. You get up every single day excited about an ideal future of education that doesn't yet exist. And so develop yourself, take more risks, learn from your failures, and that's exactly what we do within the Better Leaders, Better Schools Mastermind community. And if you're somebody who offers professional development, then that's why you build PD on the ABCs of powerful professional development for school administrators. And that's what I want to talk about now. So the ABCs stands for authenticity, belonging, and challenge. And we'll talk about authenticity next. So yes, A stands for authenticity, and each part of the ABCs can be broken down into further subdomains. So regarding authenticity, that's about psychological safety, it's about self-awareness, and it's about being values-driven. Now, we don't have time through this video to unpack each subdomain of authenticity, but I'd like to riff quickly on psychological safety using the model of Google. So in 2015, Google completed a 2-year study. They interviewed over 180 employees, over 200 interviews, and the question they were trying to answer was, what makes the highest performing teams efficient, effective, and the most productive? They found 250 attributes that make high performing teams work. Yes, creativity is important, productivity, teamwork, balance, all this kind of stuff. But that's not what was number one. Number one on this 2-year Google study was psychological safety. Your people, when you're offering professional development, whether in a building level, district level, or what I do within the Mastermind at Better Leaders, Better Schools, we want to make sure that our members feel psychologically safe to be fully themselves, whatever that means. So if I was to express fully who I am, my name is Danny Bauer. I am male. I identify as cisgender. I stand on land that belongs to the Onondaga Nation. My pronouns are he and him. If you have a visual impairment, I'm wearing a gray, I think the color is heather, hoodie. And it says Ruckus Maker across the front because that's what I love to call listeners of the podcast and members of our leadership community. I'm middle-aged, Jewish descent, and I could go on, right? But that's who I am fully. And I want to bring every part of me to experiences. And in order to do that, I have to feel safe. Now, not only is it important for me as a facilitator to feel safe, it's even more important for members of the Mastermind to feel safe. And I want to give you an activity called Brainwriting that you can take action on today in order to build psychological safety like that. So Brainwriting is a simple activity that you can use. Here's how it works, and it builds psychological safety. The reason Brainwriting matters is, unlike its opposite twin, or evil twin, I should say, brainstorming, there, the first voice, often the loudest voice, and not necessarily the best baked idea will win just because somebody was courageous to share first and everybody else goes, yeah, that sounds right. Let's go with that. So brainwriting is a way to include everybody's voice and to establish psychological safety. So ahead of a meeting, let's say you're a week out, maybe even a day out, share the prompt, share the discussion question, share the debate that you're about to have, and challenge all the people that are going to participate in this meeting to write their response ahead of the meeting. And then just have a protocol for everybody to bring those responses, and you make space for every single member to read through their thoughts. You might even have people switch responses too prior to sharing. That way they don't have a horse in the race or a dog in the race. Is it a cat? I don't even know. But the point is that everybody's voice is heard, and it's not just the first or the loudest voice that wins. Therefore, too, you're mining for the best idea, and nobody's going to argue to go against the best idea within an organization. Finally, for those more introverted, quieter, potentially even less confident, this is going to add their voice to the discussion. And by adding that diversity of thought, you're only going to build a stronger team. So that's one way that you can build psychological safety within your teams, by using brainwriting as an activity prior to a meeting. And that's all I want to say about authenticity. So up next is B for belonging. Now B stands for belonging, and the subdomains of belonging, in my view, have to do with trust, inclusive environments, and shared purpose. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about inclusive environments. And to do that, I'm going to bring you back to 2018. For all those, is that Wayne's World, I think. So back in 2018, I was asking members of the Mastermind to question tradition, because in my view and experience, is that tradition is built for a kid in a community that most likely doesn't exist in your school anymore. And we don't like saying this part out loud, but some traditions are racist and they need to be dismantled and just eradicated, right? So I asked members to challenge tradition. Now this is so easy for a school leader. You can look at just your students across demographics, right? And look at your advanced classes, AP classes, and look at who has access. I bet you're going to find a lot of your more affluent and white students have access to these classes. But what about your black and brown students, right? What about your students that might not come from an affluent family? Do they have access to what are your quote-unquote best courses? That's easy to take action on. Another way is to look at discipline. You could look at student dress code. It is so easy to question tradition in the school context. But the challenge for me was in 2018, how do I challenge what I built? My company was only 3 years old at the time. And I'm like, okay, I think I have a lot of great ideas, and I'm trying to build an inclusive, equitable company. But what am I doing that needs to be challenged myself? So when I really thought about it, I wanted to know if I'm about women in leadership, if I care about hearing and amplifying the stories of leaders of color, does that show up in my work? Does that show up as who are my guests on my podcast? And you might have heard this story before, and that's great. So side note coaching tip. Even if you heard this story before, okay, stop the video, no, or a better way, what is the insight? What's the thing that you need to hear today on this story that's going to make you better? Okay, so back to the story. School Leadership Series is a Monday through Friday podcast I've been putting on. It's always about 5 minutes or less, normally around 3 minutes. Long story short, I said, do I have to host my own podcast? And again, if I care about women in leadership, leaders of color, what if I invited and built a diverse team of incredible leaders who could create content on the School Leadership Series, and I'll give them the microphone? And so we took action on that, and I've been so happy. It's one of the best professional decisions I've ever made. And since 2018, we've been pumping out great content from a very diverse group of leaders that benefits you, the ruckus maker listening. Now, the other thing that I question too is the books that we read in the Mastermind. And one of the value-added aspects of our leadership community is that you're not going to ever read books from education, number one. Number two, the books you do read tend to be books you'd never pick up, and they're from different industries. And by absorbing and engaging and taking action on that content, you learn from the best of the best outside of education, which can be an echo chamber, and you become a better leader. So in terms of building inclusive environments, we read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Kendi, and that was after George Floyd was murdered. Coming up this year, we're going to be reading The Person You Mean to Be. So we all want to be good people. How do we have difficult conversation? This one is about obviously overcoming bias and how to have those difficult conversations. So it builds on the same idea. Oh, is it possible that our country, right, or nation states are built on oppressive systems meant to keep people down? This is caste. Does caste exist in America? We'll find out. And then here's one on inclusive conversations as well. So that is something that we do to build inclusive environments in the Better Leaders, Better Schools Mastermind. It's as easy as choosing books that are not necessarily always from a white male perspective and digs into issues that we all need to be talking about and wrestling with, especially as school leaders, because this is informing and influencing future generations. So that's all I want to say about belonging. And up next, C for challenge. So the last component of ABCs of powerful professional development, we've talked about authenticity, we've talked about belonging. C stands for challenge. And the subdomains of challenge have to do with mindset, taking action, and having a powerful community. So what I want to share here has to do with taking action. So this quote comes from the founders of an organization called Basecamp. And I love how they just think about organizations and work and life. And they have a beautiful book called Rework as well. I don't know, it's over there. I'm not going to grab it. But the point is, they have some really innovative ideas about work. You should check it out. But here's what they say in terms of taking action. And to me, this is just hilarious because we all can relate. Here's what the founders say, Fried and Hansen. We all have that one friend who says, I had the idea for eBay. If only I had acted on it, I'd be a billionaire. That logic is pathetic and delusional. Having the idea for eBay has nothing to do with actually creating eBay. What you do is what matters, not what you think of, say, or plan. So C, challenge, taking action. We read another book on objectives and key results called Measure What Matters. John Doerr said ideas are easy, execution's everything. I think that's what Fried and Hansen are pointing out too. Yeah, we all talked about eBay, Netflix, Uber. Unless you're taking action, that means nothing. And that's part of the challenge that builds powerful professional development. There's a guy in our community named Scott. He is a leader in a Midwestern elementary school. And this dude is incredible. And I admire Scott so much because he always takes the ideas we teach in the Mastermind and then he applies them in the school context. That's the point. You're growing consistently on an ongoing basis to take action to make yourself and your community better. What is Scott taking action on? I've talked about sticky core values. So not integrity, because everybody wants to have integrity. Sticky core values tell a story. So Scott, one of his core values is Rocky's cufflinks. That kind of core value makes you go, what are Rocky's cufflinks all about? There's a story there. The story spreads because the idea is strong. The community rallies around that type of sticky core value. They look for ways that people are living it out and momentum builds. Scott has built an internal mastermind for his peers within his district. And if you haven't seen my video on building a ideal culture for your school and how to do that through a dream journal or a bucket list, guess what? Scott took action on that idea too. It's taken his relationship as a principal with his faculty to a whole nother level. They know that he cares about him. And as a result, they'll do anything for Scott. And that's a huge reason why his school is such a huge success. So Scott is an action taker. I hope you are too. And that's why C, challenge, is so important, an integral part of powerful professional development. So that's it. Hey, it's Danny from Better Leaders, Better Schools, and I hope you enjoyed our discussion today on the ABCs of powerful professional development for school administrators. Now, before you go, I have to ask, if you got value from today's teaching on building powerful professional development, then would you give this a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any content? Bonus points, extra credit if you share this on social media. And I'd love for you to leave a comment below the video. Now here's the question. When I'm coaching one-on-one or even in the mastermind, I like to coach not just for information, right? I just shared a ton of great information, which I hope you take action on. But I also, and more importantly, coach for insight, right? So I don't know what that is for you. In the comments below, just write down the number one insight that you got from today's video on the ABCs of powerful professional development for school leaders, and I'd love to see. And if there's anything I can do to help, then I'll respond and make sure I point you into the right direction. Hey, and since I promised to include Alba, and you can see how she grows as the YouTube Better Leaders, Better Schools channel grows, here she is. So the last time she was on here, she was maybe around 3.5 months. Here's Alba at 5, just 2 days after her first puppy, puppy haircut. And she's looking great. You can see her eyes, and I just wanted you to see Alba too. So, hey, thanks again for watching, and go make a ruckus.